Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
This episode of Sports Spectrum is brought to you by Compassion International. To sponsor a child and bring a hope more powerful than poverty to a child in need, visit compassion.com/sportsspectrum. Through Compassion, the local church, and the love of a sponsor like you, 2 million children and their families are no longer struggling alone for basic needs like food, education, healthcare, and help. They're encouraged, sometimes for the first time, to dream and to imagine and to learn and to grow. Where there was hardship, there is now hope. You can help make that difference in a child's life with your tax-deductible contribution of just $38 a month, connecting a child living in poverty with a loving church-based child sponsorship program. For more information about how you can release a child from poverty, go to compassion.com/sportsspectrum, pray about it, and consider sponsoring a child today. Really excited to have Patrick Dimarco on the show today, the Buffalo Bills fullback. Patrick has had somewhat of a whirlwind journey, especially early in his NFL career. He went undrafted out of South Carolina in 2011, playing for the legend that is Steve Spurrier, and then signed with the San Diego Chargers in 2011, and it didn't work out there. Pat shares in a very deep way what took place during his time trying to make it to the NFL in 2011, and then signed on with the Chiefs in 2012, and then his career really started to take off when he got to Atlanta in 2013 and spent 4 seasons there with the Falcons, including a trip to the Super Bowl, that Super Bowl 51 game where the Falcons lost to the Patriots in overtime, Super Bowl 51. And then March 9th, 2017, Patrick signed a 4-year deal with the Buffalo Bills, where he is currently still located as a fullback for Bills Mafia. A little piece of trivia here, and I didn't talk about this with him, but Pat's uncle is Chris Dimarco, the professional golfer. So he's got a little golf background in his family as well. And I know he's a golf enthusiast when he's not focused on football and focused on his time playing football. This was a fun podcast, and Pat is a really good interview. And I say that about a lot of people, certainly. But Pat understands the idea of storytelling, and he's able to take us in this podcast to some deep places, some dark places that he was going through, and some dark situations during a time when his faith was being challenged, his manhood was being challenged, his time as an NFL player for his first 22 years of his life, and now suddenly that's being challenged. So I really liked where Pat went with the podcast and really appreciate him being as open and transparent as he was. Take a listen to our conversation with Patrick Dimarco, Buffalo Bills fullback, here on Sports Spectrum. Pat, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is going to be a fun one.
I'm looking forward to chatting with you, Pat. This is great. Thanks for being here. And the offseason is just about over. You got a couple more days here as we tape this before training camp. It's almost time for the 2019 season. Where's your emotions right now as you ready for year number 9 in the NFL?
Really, I'm just at peace, especially right now, enjoying time with the family. We have, I'm here with my wife, Kirsten, and our 2 kids, Weston and Sutton. So just soaking up all this time right now because in 3 or 4 weeks, it's complete chaos when season starts. So just soaking it up and enjoying the time now because I know in season, the main focus is to try to win a championship. So
it's the off season, and obviously there's more time to spend with the family, but you still got to kind of pay attention to football and your body and working out and things like that. Give us a glimpse of the off season in preparing yourself for the season and what that looks like for you, especially now that you're in year 9. You kind of got this thing down to a pat, I would imagine.
Yeah, when I was younger, I was really hard-headed and pretty stubborn, and what had always given me success was just outworking everybody. And I've realized the last 2 or 3 years as I was creeping up on 30, and now I am 30, that doesn't necessarily work for me anymore. When I do too much, my body wears down, and it takes longer for me to recover. So now it's about working smarter, not harder. So I'll kind of walk you through just a typical day right now, and this 5-week period that we have off before training camp. I I'm up pretty early. One of the kids is waking me up at 6:30, standing at the bed saying, "Hi, Dad." So we go through that every morning, and then I'm usually out of the house by about 7:30. Eat breakfast, and I'm out, and I go to my gym up in just a little north Atlanta, and I have a PT there who works with me for about 30 or 45 minutes, gets me moving around, gets all the joints and everything going, and then I usually do a running session from 9 to 10, and then from 10 to 11:30, 11:45, I'll do my strength training. And then after that, I'll pop back in and see the PT for another 20 or 30 minutes to do some icing or some more joint mobs, whatever needs to be done that day. And then I'm back home, and it's full daddy duty the rest of the day.
And then the season itself, once that kind of comes, that's when the wives become the true heroes of families, don't they? Because it's really hard to kind of be all in on football and you can still have time with your family, but it's much different during the season, isn't it?
Oh yeah, they're rock stars in season. It's crazy everything they can do from when it comes to being up at 2 and 3 in the morning and giving a baby a bottle to going to sleep for 3 or 4 more hours and then being up at 6 with both kids and trying to get the household under control and feeding the kids and taking them to daycare, taking them to soccer practice. Trying to get an hour to exercise for herself in each day, and then preparing lunch and dinner. And when I get home, I usually get home for about bath time, and I help out with bath time, and I'll put my son to sleep. And that's about my daddy duty. Besides our off day on Tuesday, where I try to spend as much time as I can with the kids. But yeah, she's in full motion during season.
Absolutely, they are the unsung heroes that many people don't even realize when you're talking about NFL players. Pat Dimarco is our guest here on Sports Spectrum. Those Bills fans, I want to talk about Buffalo a little bit. You came over to Buffalo and signed a free agent deal with them in March of 2017. Those Bills fans, they're unlike any kind of fan I've seen in the NFL. Very loyal. And I've talked to Jeremiah Searles about this. I've talked to Levi Wallace about this. Bills Mafia is no joke, is it?
It's like a real life cult up there. It's it's something special. It really takes me back to my college days playing in South Carolina. Since being in the NFL, like, there's good fans. Atlanta had some awesome fans. My 1 year in Kansas City was awesome. I thought the fans were awesome there. But from a standpoint of like live and die by it, like it's Buffalo. I mean, it's such a tough town, tough people, and all they want is a good football team, and that's what we're putting the work in for each and every day.
And they stay true because obviously Buffalo, it's been forever since they've really had a ton of success. We'll say they went into the playoffs a couple of years ago, and that was a big deal, I know, for the city, and a lot of people were really following along with what the Bills were able to accomplish. Tell me about the team this year, how you feel about it, and just going into 2019, some of the pieces that you've been able to assemble with that team, having gone through OTAs and mini camp and getting ready for the season.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think this is this is my 3rd year in Buffalo. This will be the best year, the best team we've had. We made the playoffs 2 years ago, but from like an all around team standpoint and just like a bunch of guys that love each other and that want to play for the guy next to them, that's what Coach McDermott has been trying to assemble these 3 years, and I think like guys finally bit the hook, and guys are finally buying in. You can just tell by the atmosphere, the charisma of the guys, the dinners, the hangout parties and everything like that that's going on while we're there. It's just a different culture, a culture of love, a culture of I'm not going to let the guy next to me down. And, that's what really makes a team. That's what brings success. So I'm really pumped. It's going to be fun. We added a few guys in free agency and in the draft, guys like Cole Beasley, John Brown in free agency that are really and Frank Gore on offense that are really going to help us. And we rebooted the offensive line. And in the draft, we added Ed Oliver, who's going to be a stud, Dawson Knox, a tight end, who's going to make some big plays for us this year. So, I think this is going to be a really special year for us, and I'm excited for it.
Pat, at what point in your journey And I know your journey has a lot of ups and downs and different twists and turns, especially even getting to the NFL. And I want to go there in a second. But at what point in your journey did you realize that fullback was where you would make your mark in the NFL?
Oh man, not until probably my second year in the NFL.
Okay, yeah.
My first year actually, I signed an undrafted free agent a deal with the San Diego Chargers, and I got hurt, and I thought my dreams were taken away. We'll get there later, but it ended up not until I signed in Kansas City for what would have been my second year, my first real opportunity. Spent a bunch of time on practice squad and finally got my first shot on an active game. First play, first hit, made the block, and I'm like, okay, I can do this. And that was kind of it. And from then on, it's still been a crazy road, but that from then on, I was kind of like, I can do this. I can play with these guys.
There's not a lot of fullbacks left either. And it's an interesting dynamic with the current state of the NFL. Obviously, Buffalo still believes in you, and there's some other teams that still carry fullbacks, but it's sort of been a lost art. This is year 9 for you. Tell me about that position and kind of the state of it. Obviously, you feel it's still valuable because you're still employed, and I know last year you played a lot of special teams as well. You want to make yourself as valuable as you can to each team, but that position has changed a lot over the years. But for you, has it changed the way you go about playing that position? What's that been like?
Yeah, in this league, it's always, and I'm sure you've heard this a million times, it's the more you can do
Right.
from a point, especially at the fullback position. You're only going to play, I think, the most I've played in, probably my highest play count per year was like close to 35% of offensive snaps, which in the grand scheme of things is not that much. So I have to contribute on special teams. Even to get there, I had to contribute in third down pass protection where they threw me in to be the third down back to pick up blitzes and stuff like that. So you really have to embrace the role and know you're not going to be out there every play. Although as competitors, we all want to be out there every play. I have to get out of my way sometimes in that sense. But you have to embrace it, and you have to realize, just go out there and try to do your job every time, whatever it is, whether it be covering a kick or in pass protection or a run block or one of the few times I get the ball. I mean, there's a bunch of things you can do, but you have to just embrace it. Not take it for granted because, it can be gone any day.
Absolutely. And trusting God during the process is really something that we hear a lot, especially from athletes and especially on this podcast. For you, what does that look like for you on your journey as it's taken you from South Carolina? You mentioned being undrafted and eventually to the Pro Bowl and the Super Bowl, and now your third year in Buffalo. Tell me about trusting God in the process and maybe share a little of the testimony of how you came to know who Christ was.
Yeah, so at a young age, I grew up in a church. Both my parents, I grew up Lutheran down in Orlando, Florida. Went to St. Stephen's Lutheran Church. And, I was baptized. I went through communion and all that stuff. But all I wanted to do was play. All I wanted to do was sports. I wanted to do AAU baseball. And a lot of that stuff kind of interfered with my faith life growing up. And, at that point in time, I'm like, I don't want to go to church. I want to play a doubleheader today. And then when I got to college, we had an incredible FCA staff and team chaplain at the University of South Carolina. And that's really where my faith process picked up. And that's where I really got to know and develop a relationship with Christ. And, a couple of people that were there were Adrian Dupre, who was our team chaplain. And then Jack Easterby, who I think Jack. He's with the Texans now.
Yeah.
He was our FCA director. He worked with the basketball team, but I spent a lot of time with him and really digged in with him. But really, I would say probably the biggest moment and most pivotal time in my faith journey was my rookie year when I broke my foot the third day of training camp, and I thought, okay, this is done. Football's over. Is everything I worked for my entire life. I've invested 22 years and, this is my chance, and I break my foot on a measly cut, and I think my opportunity's up. And I was in a dark place. I had surgery and all that stuff, and really didn't know what life was going to take me. And Jack Easterby kind of reached out to me, thank God. And we met about once a week. We had lunch once a week at a place in Columbia, South Carolina. And we talked about life. And from there, he started to pour into me. And that's when it really clicked. Like, it's not about me. It's about God. God did all this stuff for a reason. God didn't want me to get hurt, but there's a bigger purpose for me getting hurt. And I think that, honestly, that purpose was for me to go from San Diego, California, back to Columbia, South Carolina, spend time with my girlfriend then, now wife. Who knows if our relationship would have lasted the long distance if I didn't get hurt and I didn't go back and spend time in Columbia, South Carolina. So it's crazy how he works everything for the greater good, and it all worked out. And, still cranking out year 9, but a pivotal focus for us in our life, especially raising 2 young children now. I just try to say God and Jesus as much as I can around my kids, so they get to know those words, and they get to know what it is and why we live, and why the Dimarcos are the way they are, why we're different than other people. So it's really fun. It's really exciting with the kids right now. So hopefully I kind of answered some of your questions there.
Oh, absolutely, Pat. And you mentioned that sort of deep place, and you mentioned actually a couple times, those early years and trying to make it into the NFL. Can you take me a little bit deeper into those dark areas that you were in and kind of share with us what was happening? You say you broke your foot when you were, in San Diego, and then that took you back to South Carolina to kind of reevaluate, but take us through that, because you don't just throw those words out there, dark place, if it really wasn't dark. It's not like those are just kind of the throwaway words. So things were going on pretty deep there. Can you take us to that?
Yeah. So I was undrafted in 2011, and it was the lockout year. So I was working front desk at a local gym in Columbia, South Carolina after the draft, and went through that, didn't get drafted, and got my call to go, got a training camp invite with the San Diego Chargers, went out there, was thrilled, was so excited. My opportunity was finally here. And then the third day of training camp, I broke my foot. Just made a cut that I've made a million times. But being stubborn like I am, I finished practice on it, was kind of limping around. And I remember the special teams coach came up to me and he said, what's going on? You look good running around, but as soon as you throttle down, you really got a pretty serious limp. What's going on? And I was like, oh, no big deal. I just need to ice my foot. And I went in the training room, had them look at my foot. They either said, oh, it's a really, really bad sprain, or you broke your foot. Let's go get an MRI or an X-ray. So we went and got the X-ray. And as a rookie who's just hoping for a chance, that was the one thing I didn't want to hear. And so I ended up having surgery a couple days later, and really I was treated like crap out there at that point. Like really bad, like a piece of meat. I was sitting in the training room 2 days after surgery with ice on my foot, and somebody from the front office comes down and says, "Who's Pat Dimarco?" Didn't even know who I was. And he said, "Can you come here?" He's like, "I want your playbook. We don't want you to go to meetings. We're going to set you off-site for therapy. We're going to get you a gym membership somewhere else. You're not going to get tickets to the games, and this and that." And I'm like, well, this is weird. Like, I'm a part of this team, and I've invested so much in my opportunities here, and this guy's basically telling me that I'm not accepted. So as soon as that happened, I called my agent, and I was pretty beat up because it was basically telling me I wasn't good enough, and we just had you here just to be here. You're just filling a spot for us, and that wasn't my intentions. And then so I told my agent, I was like, if they don't want me here, I don't want to be here. So let's send me back to South Carolina, back to where people love me and people want me to be around. So got sent back. They flew me back to South Carolina on the next flight available with a broken foot. And then I did all my therapy back in South Carolina. But the dark place was really, there was also pain meds and stuff were involved there a little bit, but thankfully I know how addictive they were, and people were telling me, make sure you steer clear of this stuff. Take it just for just for pain tolerances and stuff.
Yeah.
Don't take it over the top because it can cause some serious damage. So as that stuff kind of dwindled away, I thought it was over. I thought my chance to play football, my passion, my love was over. And, your parents always ask their children, what's plan A, what's plan B, what's plan C? My plan A, plan B, plan C was to play in the NFL. So I was confused. I was lost. I just was very unsure of what life had in store for me. And, thankfully Jack Easterby came along and asked me if I wanted to go get a sandwich. And that's how it all started.
Isn't it amazing when it's such a simple thing for so many of us that, all of us are going through crap in our lives or difficult moments and difficult times and difficult seasons, whether it's spiritually or, in a relationship with someone, and simply just saying, hey, you want to go get a sandwich could legitimately change the trajectory of someone's life, right?
Hey man, it's the Lord works in mysterious ways that we'll never understand. But it's amazing how the puzzle always works out at the end.
Pat, what does seeking God look like for you today, as far as the off season and even during the season, but just your relationship with the Lord as a football player? I'm guessing when you were early on in your career, and I hear this from a lot of athletes, you're so focused on just achievement and trying to make it. And you said plan A, B, and C was to become an NFL player. So your drive and desire is to do that. How has that evolved for you spiritually and maturing over the years in terms of the man that you are as a football player, but even as a believer in Christ?
Yeah, I'm from all the standpoints of the measurements and what you look for in an NFL football player, I probably don't meet many of those criterias.
Yeah.
So there is a reason why I'm in the NFL, and that's not because I ran a 4.840, because not many teams want a guy who runs a 4.840. It's because God wants me to be here. And he wants to use my influence through the NFL to fans, to the audience, to teammates, to my family, to my kids, to everybody. And every day I wake up in the morning and I'm just extremely thankful because, like I said, plan A, plan B, plan C were to play football, and the Lord made these plans work. Although it was pretty tough. He helped me all along the way. So what I try to do every morning is I use the YouVersion app, and I do just a quick little Bible study every morning as soon as I wake up, a little devotional, and then get in the Word. And then by that time, one of the kids is fussing and crying, so I get up and deal with that. But then something else I implemented probably a couple years ago was right before I step on the football field, I always bow down and say a quick prayer and just say thank you. Just remind God that I'm not taking this opportunity for granted. And then at night, we really try to implement with our kids praying before we go to bed. And we have a couple of those the Kids First Bible books that we read, which really simplifies it a lot.
Yeah, doesn't it? It helps us too, right?
Help me understand a lot more of the Bible stories, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, we joined a church back here in Atlanta, Georgia. We go to Dunwoody United Methodist Church, and have developed a great community there, a great community of friends. My son actually goes to school up there, so a lot of really exciting things going on here at home. And then, not to mention up in Buffalo, we have an amazing team chaplain up there, Lynn Vandenboss. Thankfully, Coach McDermott, I think we're one of just a couple teams that has a full-time chaplain on staff. So Lynn's there 24/7 access for us, which is pretty amazing. And he does an awesome job with us. So, and his wife runs a women's study, which all the wives who have kids bring their kids to, and the kids there's like a babysitter there who does a little Bible study with the kids. So it's an incredible time right now for our family and our lives. And we couldn't be more excited.
Pat Dimarco is our guest here on Sports Spectrum. Just a couple more questions here with Pat. I'm going to go back on the field because I always like to ask some football questions as well. What was your welcome to the NFL moment in that first game, or that moment in the first few games that you played when you realized, oh my goodness, this is real, I'm here, and this is happening? What was that like? You have that moment for you?
Yeah. Well, I'd probably say I had that big time in college. I think my first day of like spring ball, we ran just like a lead ISO, and there was a big linebacker, Jasper Brinkley, who just came straight down the hill and thumped me, and like a bomb exploded. We both went flying. And I remember my running backs coach came up to me and he goes, "You're playing in the SEC, dude. Get up." So that was the intro to college. And then I would say the intro to the NFL was training camp my second year with the Kansas City Chiefs, trying to pass block Justin Houston and Tumba Ali, which is not an easy feat. You can ask most tackles in the NFL if it's a pretty hard job, and they would say yes, and then just subtract 70 or 80 pounds on a fullback and ask them to do the same thing. So, football it's an incredible game. It's very humbling. And I was definitely humbled all those times. And, but it also strived me to continue to work on my craft and, sooner or later be able to do all these things. So those were two times that definitely stuck out.
Pat, you played in one of the more memorable Super Bowls, maybe not memorable for a good reason, certainly for Atlanta fans and anybody who played in that game on the Falcons sidelines like yourself, in having that game be a 28-3 game versus the Patriots, certainly the Falcons and Patriots in Super Bowl 51, and then losing the only Super Bowl ever to go to an overtime, and the Patriots coming up victorious. I don't want to sit there and talk about what it was like to lose a game like that. Obviously, it's hard to lose any kind of game, especially one like that for the title. But from a spiritual perspective, how were you able to deal with a loss like that? Looking back now, how were you able to kind of get through having been so close to winning a championship, to having that ring, and then not having it? How were you able to deal with that?
Oh man. There's still like a little void, deep down, because, we were so close and had every opportunity, and it just slipped away.
Yeah.
But I would say what really stuck out to me after that was how much love that team had for each other. After, the worst thing that could ever happen to a football team is being so close and losing the biggest game of our lives. But how, when we got to the locker room, how nobody was mad. I mean, everybody was more sad than mad.
Yeah.
And how, like, the love, you had guys that felt like they lost it, or you had guys that felt like it was their fault and this and that, and just the outpouring love that the whole team and the whole staff and everybody showed on the guys that were so disappointed and felt like they let everybody down. I felt like that influence just really moved me. And it was kind of a love that, I've never really seen in football. Everybody preaches love your teammates, but when the tough really gets going, and when, you lose a Super Bowl, and how everyone just flocked to the guys that they could tell were super upset, super bummed, and how they just, hugged on them, loved them, told them, how great they were and how excited they were to spend these last 7 or 8 months with them. That was just really special to me. That's one thing that really stuck out.
Yeah, that's the thing about sports, I think, in the moment, the agony of defeat, right? In the old wide world of sports, it's, being able to even appreciate the agony is the difficult thing. And even in James, it says, count it all as joy, even in the trials that we go through in our lives. And that's a real thing for sports and for athletes to kind of do that. That's impressive. Have you been able to kind of carry that with you through the ups and downs and the highs and lows on being an NFL player with Buffalo now?
Yeah. I mean, the game we play it's all about riding the ebbs and flows, because there's so many good plays and so many bad plays, and you just have to, I've come to the realization that I'm not perfect, not in life, and especially not in life, but also not on the football field. I'm gonna screw up. I'm gonna make some bonehead plays. I'm gonna make some bad decisions. Like, I'm not perfect. The only perfect one is Jesus, who died on the cross for us.
Yeah.
And I'm just at peace with that. I'm at peace knowing that I'm human. I was born into sin, and I'm born into mistakes, and that there's nothing I can do that, I can work on them, but I'm always going to fall short of the glory of God. But through God's grace, I have an opportunity to be redeemed, and to have that relationship with Christ. So it was extremely overwhelming, kind of really learning that, my first few years in the NFL. I think Jack was a huge mentor to me, and actually still is. So he's helped me realize a lot of things that I couldn't have realized on my own.
Pat Dimarco has been our guest here on Sports Spectrum. Last question, Pat. We asked this to all of our guests here on the show. What are you learning today from God? What is he teaching you in the season of life that you're in as you get ready for year 9, as you get ready for another NFL season, and certainly being a husband and a dad? Got some little ones running around. What is God teaching you today?
I think he's teaching me just to take every day, day by day, and just to really appreciate life and the beauty of, watching your kids grow, watching my wife love on my kids. Like, that brings me the most joy. Just realizing the good in everything out there, in this world. It's really incredible. I mean, watching the relationships and watching my kids grow, and just like sitting back and just like not having to be in motion, but just sitting back and like realizing all the wonderful things that God's doing in my life.
That's good stuff there. Pat Dimarco is our guest here, Buffalo Bills fullback. Bills Mafia getting set to go again in 2019. Here we go. Pat, thanks so much for being here on the show. We'll be watching and wishing you nothing but the best, and hopefully we'll catch up again in person next year. Thanks again.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Jason.
And many thanks to Patrick Dimarco, Buffalo Bills fullback, for joining us here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. He's another one of those Bills Mafia players that we've had on the show, including Jeremiah Searles earlier this year. And we also have Levi Wallace from the Bills coming up in a few weeks as well. Good conversation there. So lots of fun here. I hope the Bills do well. I really do. Their fan base deserves it. And certainly when you talk to a guy like Pat Dimarco and you know how close he was with Atlanta and winning a Super Bowl, how amazing would it be to see Buffalo be back and playing in a Super Bowl after you remember those 90s Bills teams with Jim Kelly. So God can do anything, as we say, right? And so you never know. And wishing Pat Dimarco and the Buffalo Bills nothing but the best in 2019. Give him a follow over on Twitter. He's at Pat Dimarco42. Pat Dimarco42. We thank Pat. We also thank our sponsors, Compassion International. We love Compassion. We're so grateful to have them as partners with us here at Sports Spectrum. Check out the website, compassion.com/sportspectrum, compassion.com/sportspectrum. Pray about it and consider releasing a child from poverty for just $38 a month, tax deductible. It's a wonderful way to make a difference for a child waiting to be released from poverty, providing that child with hope, providing that child with a future. You can make that difference. Go to compassion.com/sportspectrum and consider sponsoring a child today. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate you guys checking out this podcast. If this is the first time you've heard about Sports Spectrum, just want to say welcome. Thanks for hanging out with us. Click that subscribe button if it's the first time you've ever listened to this podcast, this show. That subscribe button will allow you to never miss an episode of Sports Spectrum. 300 episodes plus. Click that subscribe button, never miss an episode of Sports Spectrum. Also, you can reach me on email, jason@sportspectrum.com. I'd love to hear from you guys. Check out our social media pages as well, and of course our website, sportspectrum.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time with a brand new episode here at Sports Spectrum. Have a great rest of your day.